We will go ahead and get started. I will like to kick it off to Housing Manager Mayan Johnson to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mayan Johnson, Housing Department Manager, and me and the Housing Department would like to welcome you to our RUSH Regional Utilities Supporting Housing Planning Projects Application Workshop. Today's meeting is also being recorded, so if you forget to jot down a few notes, we will still have the recording available for you to go through. So for today's agenda, we'll be going over the program interview for the planning application for RUSH, and then we'll go over a program timeline and how to apply. So I'll be turning it over to my colleague, Jessica Reyes Juarez, on how to apply, and then information about application review and other announcements, and then we'll have our Q&A session. So we do look forward to a robust discussion and questions about our program. So jumping directly into what REAP is. So REAP is the Regional Early Action Planning Grant. So there's actually two of them. So starting in 2019, the state did recognize the need for the role of regional planning. So looking beyond just city boundaries in planning for housing production to increase housing production and accelerating housing production. And so with that program that's known as REAP 1.0, that was $47 million dedicated to just planning activities. But a couple years later, the state continued the idea of regional planning and helping jurisdictions at the local level through their local COG of course, increase housing production. So the REAP 2.0 program was recently enacted, and it provides SCAG a regional formula share. So that's $246 million to do transformative planning and implementation activities. So for what this means is that it must accelerate infill development, and the emphasis on infill that facilitates housing supply, choice, and affordability. In addition, they also have to affirmatively further fair housing. So not just increasing housing, affordable housing, and addressing low-income communities, but this is also to address historical inequities and for disadvantaged communities to have access to housing and other resources. Additionally, the projects have to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And so these together help implement SCAG's Connect SoCal plan. But one thing to note too, is that for the REAP 2.0 program, all funds must be encumbered by June 2024. So we do have to act quickly on these programs. And there's a requirement that SCAG has to expend its funds by June 2026. So these are urgent projects, and we expect to hit the ground running with these projects so that we can ensure to meet these deadlines. So based on the goals of the program, we've dedicated our REAP 2 program to three main program areas. So I'm going to focus mostly on the programs to accelerate transformative housing, also known as PATH. And then within PATH, so this is our housing focus for REAP 2, there are three programs within. So there's NOFA for lasting affordability and the HIP pilot program. The calls for those projects concluded this summer. And so we're currently in the evaluation and approval process. And of course, today, we're here to focus on the RUSH pilot program. So this is one of the many programs under REAP, but nonetheless, it is one of our crucial ones. So the focus on infill. So for infill definition, and this is outlined in the guidelines published by the state. For the purposes of the REAP 2 program, it means areas where all of the following must apply. The area has to consist of unused or underutilized lands and are within existing development patterns, and that this is or will be accessible to destinations and daily services by transit, walking, or bicycling. The infill area must also be located either an urban center, urban corridor area with transit supportive densities, or within an established community that meets all of the following criteria. So the area has to consist or previously consisted of qualified urban uses. It's predominantly surrounded, about 75% of the perimeter, by parcels that are developed or previously developed within qualified urban uses. Perimeters bordering navigable bodies of water or improved parks can't be included in that definition. And also no parcel within or adjoining the area is classified as agricultural or natural and working lands. It does seem a little strict, but there actually is some flexibility because there is an acknowledgement that infill in one community may not be infill in another area in the SCAG region. And so there is some flexibility within this definition. And so hopefully we can clarify some of that today and as you develop your applications. So as I mentioned, we have three main program funding areas, and it's about almost $89 million dedicated to these three programs. So as I mentioned before, NOFA and HIP, those NOFA is for funding for innovative housing finance, trust funds and catalyst funds. And the HIP pilot program, housing infill in public and private land, we are not short on acronyms. We are scaling up development of available land, large corridor wide or area wide infill housing policy initiatives, which is about 9 million dedicated to that. Those two projects are currently being evaluated and approved. So those calls are closed. And so the RUSH pilot program is focusing on non-transportation utilities infrastructure improvements. So this could include dry utilities, so electricity, it could be water or sewer or stormwater, but it cannot include gas. This is a requirement of the state's REAP2 funding requirements. But if it includes non-transportation utilities infrastructure improvements that help accelerate housing production, that could be eligible. And my colleague Jessica will go over the application in a few slides. So we have $35 million dedicated to just the RUSH pilot program. So for program eligibility, the eligible applicants are focusing on either public agencies or tribal governments. So either a SCAG area, county or city, could be a tribal government within the SCAG region, or public agencies with a role in housing production in the SCAG region. So if you are one of these three eligible applicant groups, you can apply. So the investments in the program is focusing on investments in utility infrastructure planning and capital improvements that support housing production goals, increase capacity for a sizable number of housing units, and address housing affordability. Additionally, we're looking for projects that also embed resilience and adaptation, such as green infrastructure, that can support system utility capacity and reduce overall housing production costs. So this is what we're focusing on for the program. So our two main project categories. Today, we're mostly focusing on the infrastructure planning, which we've allocated $5 million for. The maximum awards are between $800 and $1 million. So we're looking to fund projects at the maximum amount of 800 to 1 million. And so this is focusing on plans, programs, and green infrastructure plans that support increased utility capacity in areas designated for residential development in housing elements. So this is what we're focusing on today, but later this afternoon, we'll also have a workshop on the application for capital projects. So this is, we've allocated $30 million out of the 35 million towards this bucket, and the maximum award is 10 million. And so these are obviously larger projects, but they would address current and future utility restrictions in housing development through upgrading infrastructure for sewer, water, stormwater, and dry utility systems, and enable continued infill. So that'll be the focus of this afternoon, which if you're attending right now, you can also attend later on, and we'll record that session as well if you can't attend that one. So our general program timeline, we opened the application period on September 11th. And so applications are due on November 6th at 11:59 p.m. So between the opening and November 6th, we are having office hours. So if you do have questions about program eligibility or the application, you can sign up, and Jessica will also go over how to apply for office hours. Between November and December this year, we'll have the evaluation of submitted applications and conditional awards. The regional council does have to approve the recommended project list, and so we'll look forward to that in early 2024. We'll also try to initiate the MOUs, the memos of understanding, also in early 2024, because we want to get these projects started as soon as possible. And we do have to ensure that all these funds are encumbered per REAP2 guidelines in early 2024 as well. Projects do have to be completed and invoices submitted by December 31st, 2025. So it is very crucial for your program to be eligible, your project, that it can meet that December 31st, 2025 deadline. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Jessica, who will go over the application process.
Great. Thank you, Mayan. And yes, as Mayan mentioned, my name is Jessica Reyes Juarez. I am an associate regional planner at SCAG, and I'm supporting this program. So before we get into the application components, I just want to make sure everybody knows how to download the application. So if you want to follow along, we'll go to scag.ca.gov/REAP 2021. And then from there, you'll scroll down and find the programs to accelerate transformative housing and select that. And from there, you'll see that it lands to the regional utility supporting housing page. This is where you'll find all of the materials. So if you scroll down, you'll see that this is where you can sign up for office hours. This is where we'll post this webinar. And our contact information is also available here. So we really do encourage you to sign up for office hours if you're interested in applying. And then if you open up the How to Apply tab, you'll see that the infrastructure planning projects, there are two different applications, right? We have one application for planning and another application for the capital projects. So for the purpose of this program, for this webinar, we're going to go over the planning projects. And you'll see the Word document there and the workbook and instructions on how to apply. And then if you keep scrolling, we'll have some resources there. We do encourage you to look at the updated PATH program guidelines. These have been updated, so the version that says updated is the right one. We also have an infill guidance document. We'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but this is to help applicants create a map that shows how your project is meeting infill. And it also provides some more explanation on some of those terms that Mayan went over. And then we have the tool here that will help you map your priority growth areas and your priority populations. We'll also review this later. Great. So again, we're going to be looking at the RUSH application for planning projects. This is a Word document. It is form fillable, so it's going to direct you to the elements that you're supposed to be filling out. You don't have to edit this in a separate document, and you can submit it as a Word or as a PDF. But before we review the sections, let's just look over the submittal checklist. So the submittal checklist is really intended to help you make sure that you're completing all of your application sections correctly, and that you're not missing any important elements. And the application is broken down into these 4 key sections that we'll go over right now as well. And you'll also be asked to submit a series of attachments, including maps and your budget and your scope that we'll also review later on. Great, so let's start with section 1, the terms and signature. This is just verifying that you have an authorized person that can sign on behalf of your organization. So this could be a city manager, a general manager, executive director, planning director, and that you're verifying all information is correct and it's true and completed, and that you're adhering to the PATH program guidelines. So you don't need to have, I know we've gotten this question before, if we need to have a resolution. You don't need to have a resolution from your board or city council to apply. It just needs to be signed by an authorized person, but we will require this resolution later during the MOU process if your application is successful. And moving on to section 2, the minimum requirements. First, we ask for you to confirm your eligibility. Mayan mentioned who are the eligible applicants, but listed here again as a refresher, those are SCAG counties or cities and tribal governments, or public agencies with a role in housing production. And again, all within servicing the SCAG region. And you'll have to be located within an infill area per that infill definition. And then you have to align to our program objectives coming out of REAP 2.0 and being eligible activity. So you must confirm that, and also must confirm that your project is meeting infill. And then we move on to the applicant information. So just provide the name of the person that's applying, the name of your city or your organization, and the address. And then if you're submitting multiple applications, we ask that you prioritize them. Again, we do suspect that this program is going to be oversubscribed. So please, prioritize and put your best foot forward, but we are anticipating that we're going to get more funding requests than funding available. And then I'll also provide the name of your project, the area that it's serving, and the funding request and the county that it's in. And if you have any matching funds, you can also list that there. Also not required. And then moving on to the project description. We do ask you to describe how the funds will be used to expand the utility capacity serving the housing needs and to advance resilience. And then we also ask you to make sure that you tie this back into your budget, your timeline, scope, and deliverables. We want to have a sense of what your ultimate adoptable item is. For our planning projects, they do need to have an adoptable item, something that can be implementable. This is coming from this the state's requirement. So make sure that you describe what that ultimate deliverable would be that would be going for adoption. And then again, we do ask that you identify your Connect SoCal priority growth areas. We have a tool that can help you determine this. And again, the projects don't need to be in a PGA to be eligible for funding, but this helps shows how you have regional impact, how you're connecting to our regional goals. Great. And now we're moving on to section 4, which is the elements of the application that will be ultimately scored using this rubric. And the questions will follow this evaluation criteria that you see here. And I just want to point out that you'll see that on the first one, lead to transformative, significant, beneficial impact, that it has the stronger weight. And that's because these are the core objectives of REAP. So you really need to be making sure that you're meeting this target. And you'll notice when you're working through the application that we score on a point scale of 0 to 5. And a 0 score would disqualify your application. So if it's not complete or if it's very lacking, it could be disqualified. And our evaluators will be using the scoring rubric. There's more information in the application questions to understand how they'll be scored. So you can be sure to look at that while you're completing your responses. Okay, so we'll just go over what to expect in these questions. I won't read them out like verbatim. You have the application, but we just want to highlight what to expect. So for leading to transformative and significant beneficial impact, again, really, this is addressing our core REAP 2.0 objectives, and that you're seeing that this investment is going to lead to a change in land use patterns and equity and travel behaviors. And ultimately, RUSH is about utilities, but it's also about housing. So we need to really see how this program is connected to housing, how these investments are going to accelerate that infill housing supply choice and affordability. So that's the first question that you'll see in this series of questions, again, targeting how these investments will feasibly increase your housing supply in your region, your choice, and your affordability. And then ultimately, how does it accelerate your housing production timeline? If with these investments, how will this improve your ability to complete housing in your region or in your project area? And then we're also asking about targeting affirmatively furthering fair housing principles. So how is it combating patterns of discrimination or segregation? How will these investments foster equitable and inclusive communities? And then we also have our reducing vehicle miles traveled question. And we ask, how does this promote development that reduces vehicle miles traveled and aligns to housing production in infill areas? Our next series of questions are going to be focused on equitable targeted outreach. And we do ask that you have a commitment to continuing outreach, especially with disadvantaged and historically underserved communities. So in these series of questions, the first one is going to ask about your experience, your organization's experience in engaging with residents in disadvantaged and historically underserved communities. And if your organization has limited experience, we do ask that you expand how you can gain that experience from this project. And the next question will ask more focusedly how you intend to engage with them. Will you engage with community organizations? How will you engage with disadvantaged communities? How will they help inform the project outcome? Again, maybe your organization has already done some of this work that you can, refer back to. But we want to see how will this project, or how is this project coming from community needs and expressed community needs, or any way that the community has shaped this program. And the next series of questions are going to talk about leverage partnerships and policy match. And we do ask that projects leverage partnerships, prior policies, or otherwise maximize the impact of the REAP 2.0 investments. This is one-time funding, so we really want to see how we can insert these investments in areas that maybe have some commitment already, that have some leverage, that have support, that are really able to be completed. So with those first questions, it's going to be focused on commitments. What are your existing or prior local policy commitments that really support this project? What are your completed plans or your ordinances that support the readiness of this project? So it really helps set the scene of how you got here, what has been developed, how is this aligned to your housing element and to other policies or programs. And for partnerships or financial match, if you have other funding commitment that's going towards this, that can help be more competitive. It's not required. You could also show how you have strong partnership commitments. This could also make your application more competitive. And we also ask that you really show how this is going to leverage or act as a catalyst for additional investment. So be sure to describe how you'll work with your partners and how this project could be catalytic. And then the next question is really focusing on your ability to complete the project. What's your experience? What's the plan for ensuring the project is completed and on time? What are the elements of being cost effective? And help us understand the project cost and where those dollars are coming from. How will they be used? And then the next series of questions is going to focus on prioritizing disadvantaged communities. So you must show how you'll support priority populations. You don't necessarily have to have a priority population listed within your geographic area, but we are saying that you still must support them. So if you don't have priority populations, we would expect that the project has commitments to affordability, commitments to AFFH. Those are other ways to show how perhaps you're in a high resource area, but you're meeting priority populations. And again, you can use the REAP 2.0 mapping indicator tool to see what priority populations are in your region. And that will ask you to identify which ones are in your area and then to submit a map, and I'll go over how to do that. And then also describe the benefits. How will the proposed projects benefit the priority populations? How will it address and repair historic or current inequities related to affordable housing, housing security, reducing displacement, or accessing those higher resource communities? And then our last series of questions is going to be focused on how your application contributes to regional transformative change. So really achieving regional goals in sustainability and resilience, in meeting our housing needs, in connecting back to our regional Connect SoCal plan, and really looking at how this is addressing housing needs across Southern California. And again, you may want to reference some of those priority growth areas if it's helpful that we ask that you identify, but again, really showing how you have a regional impact with your project. So for that first question, we'd like to see how this is a transformative approach in advancing and expanding the conditions necessary to scale up housing, either locally and how it relates to Southern California. And in terms of regional impact, describe what that impact is, make a connection to how this can reduce vehicle miles traveled, how it implements our SES strategies, How important, this is an important part, how do you think it can be applied to similar contexts in the SCAG region? And again, the impact on reducing greenhouse gas and VMT and supporting sustainability and resilience. So you'll note that there's a strong theme of sustainability and resilience in the application. So be sure to try to make sure that you're addressing those elements throughout. And so what we just reviewed are the narrative responses that we ask that you submit. These are going to be the attachments that are also included as part of your application. So the first one is the budget timeline scope and deliverables workbook. You can also download this from that webpage. It's an Excel workbook, and we ask that you submit it as an Excel. And then we ask that you submit some project area maps as well that show how your project's meeting infill, what your priority populations are in your priority growth areas. And then we do also ask for a letter of support. Only one is required, but you're welcome to submit multiple letters of support. So for the budget scope and Excel workbook, the first tab is the budget and timeline. So show what the funding request is. And in the other tab, other column that you see there, if you have other funding match, be sure to list that there as well. And break down your project by task and subtask name, show the duration. Again, as Mayan mentioned, we are looking for these projects to be completed by December 31st, 2025. So show how your program can be completed by then, and make sure that we can clearly see as well, like what that adoptable and implementable action would be. The second tab here, please be sure to complete both tabs. The second tab asks you to expand on your task. So really talk about what the scope is and what the ultimate deliverables will be. This is going to be very helpful for the evaluators to understand the cost effectiveness of the project as well, to understand that for us to understand you have an understanding of the project and that it's feasible, it can be completed, and ultimately this will help speed up our MOU process as well if the project is successful. And the next series of maps are those project area maps. So for the first one, it's the infill map. We do ask you to provide a map to show that your project is meeting the infill requirements. And you could do this by getting a satellite imagery, creating a border around your project area. Just show where the project area is and make any notes to show that it's meeting those infill requirements. So we do have that infill guidance document to kind of walk you through the steps on how to do that. So separate than that map, we had asked for others as well. So the series of priority population maps, you can use our REAP 2.0 indicator mapping tool. Next week, we'll post instructions on how to use this as well once we post the webinar in this PowerPoint. And you essentially just go to your project area and you turn on and off these layers and you take a screenshot and you can submit that. It's very easy to use. So we'll ask that you submit an individual map for each of the priority populations. And then also for the priority growth area, you'll use that same tool and turn on and off the layers for the SCAG high quality transit areas, transit priority areas, job centers, neighborhood mobility areas, and livable corridors. And again, you would just take a screenshot of that and submit it as part of your application. And then with that, we do just want to re-emphasize that we have weekly office hours. You can sign up for them using our Calendly link. It's on that main webpage that I shared with you under technical assistance. And there's no limit on the number of office hours that you can set up. We really want to, if you're interested in applying, please set up office hours. I think it would be great to at least talk to you one time to make sure you're on the same page with the outcome, the goals of this program. And then this workshop is being recorded and this PowerPoint will also be posted for future references. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to someone from our team just to make some quick announcements on another REAP 2.0 program. And then we'll get into Q&A. So please stick around.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for including me in this workshop. I hope you're all having a great workshop so far. My name is Nolan Borgman. I am on the transportation team at SCAG working on REAP programs. And I just wanted to do a quick plug of one of our programs that is different from Rush on the transportation side, called the Regional Pilot Initiatives Program. This is a program that envisions SCAG helping local jurisdictions, agencies, cities, public entities to go a step further than what's in SCAG's traditional plans to help implement things on the ground in partnership. And so we have retained $15 million from the REAP 2.0 funding for this purpose. And at the bottom, this Venn diagram shows some of the program areas that we're hoping to develop projects around. And so they are big data research, which essentially entails using the streetlight platform, for which SCAG is providing regional licenses. So if you'd like to get set up for the just to have a streetlight license, feel free to email Scott Johnson, whose email is below, on my staff, just to get a license. But also, if you have research questions, for which it would be helpful to have a consultant help you produce like a white paper around, that's the intention there. For accelerating active transportation, that involves generally this idea of quickly building out or designing more than one bike lane at a time using a complete community network concept. For mobility hubs, that's a little bit of a broad catch-all topic, but if you're interested in improving bus stops, making them more multimodal, improving shade, lighting, signage, and the like, please reach out. Mobility wallets builds on the CalITP work. If you're familiar with the California Integrated Travel Project, and involves concepts like contactless open loop payment and stipends, and for like mobility cash, as well as some improvements potentially in the mobility as a service space. Transportation demand TDM technology, transportation demand management technology. This one is still evolving, but could involve just the management of data that can help with TDM style interventions, and then curb space management, or figuring out how to optimize the curb. Of course, this all relates to the core objectives of REAP, so it has to have a nexus to infill housing and equity and reducing driving. So my message is pretty simple. If you could see yourself doing or being a part of a project in these realms, please reach out to Scott Johnson so we can have a follow-up meeting and see if there might be an opportunity to partner. So that's pretty much all I have today, unless there are any questions. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Nolan. And we'll provide your contact information in the chat if anybody wants to reach out as
Great.
well.
Yeah, Scott's doing the afternoon one, so wanted to keep it simple, but anyone is more than welcome to reach out to me, borgman@scag.ca.gov, for the same. Yeah. Great.
Great,
Last
thank
chance
you.
for any questions. All right. Thanks so much, Jessica. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Saul. And with that, we will open up to any questions you have on the Rush planning application. So you can either it's a manageable group. If you end up putting it in the chat, that's fine. But there's also the Q&A button where you can put your questions, or you can also raise your hand. Again, it's a manageable group, so I think we can I think we can do that as well. And I'll also introduce Elizabeth Carvajal, who is here and who will also be supporting the Q&A. Elizabeth, is there anything else you wanted to add while people are thinking about their questions?
So hi, everyone. Good morning. Elizabeth Carvajal, Deputy Director of Planning. I would just reemphasize that for the planning projects, different than our prior calls, we do have a maximum award. And so the maximum award for a planning project is anywhere between $800,000 to $1 million. Obviously, you can apply for less, but we do have a maximum award that's embedded into this particular program. So I want to make sure folks are aware of that as well, and that we emphasize that point.
Okay, great. I see we have some questions funneling in. Yeah, let's do that.
Someone going to read the questions, or should I just read that?
Yeah, okay, I can go through here. Okay. So one person asked, is there a disadvantage to applying for both planning and for the capital grant programs?
No, there isn't a disadvantage. The way that we structured the RUSH program is we broke up the $35 million. And so there's a pot for planning, which is $5 million. And as I noted, maximum award is between $800,000 to $1 million. On the capital side, there's $30 million available. Maximum award there would be $10 million. So there are two different pots. No disadvantage. However, I would note for your consideration, if they're for the same project, that could be an issue, because if you don't get the planning money and you need it for the capital project, that could create an issue for your capital project. So if it's one and the same project, perhaps we could speak with you during office hours and we can figure out how you can apply for the whole project in one application versus kind of piecing things up. I think would have to figure something out around that. But if they're different projects, no disadvantage. They're different pots. But if they're related to the same project, I think we'd want to talk with you to make sure that they're not, one pot isn't reliant on the other. So hopefully that helps with that question. And again, we're happy to dig into that through office hours.
Great. And then another question that came in through the chat is, would a project that focuses only on pre-construction documents for undergrounding and stormwater projects be competitive? So I think this is going to the capital project, perhaps, because I think you're identifying so it seems like it's identifying undergrounding storm water projects. So I guess we would want to know what level of pre-construction you're thinking about, right? To see if it's applicable to planning or to the capital.
Focus on pre-construction. So I guess this may be good to talk through in TA, but the question is, are we talking about developing plans that would be then used to inform a capital project, or conducting, evaluation of need and then developing the plan? And so if you're developing plans that are going to form, future capital, it might be fine under the planning category. We'd want to understand a little more closely. If you're talking about developing like a construction document versus kind of a needs assessment and a capital infrastructure plan. But essentially the key thing would be, we must think about how the projects are expanding utility infrastructure to support housing production. So we can't separate those things. And so the competitiveness will really be focused on how you're meeting the eligibility that Jessica walked us through, and how there's this need around infrastructure that you're addressing to help build housing in the community. And so I think that those are the key considerations. And again, happy to dig in more deeply on your specific circumstance through technical assistance as well through the office hours.
Great, thank you. And then another question that's come in, is there a requirement that 10% of the award goes to our local COG?
No.
Yeah, no, that's not required. And for the planning grant, can our grant application consist of multiple projects, or does every project need to be applied for separately?
So each application has a maximum award of $800,000 to $1 million. And so if you have a planning project with different sites and it meets the program requirements and eligibility, and you stay within that 800,000 to 1 million, you're able to submit one application. However, if your ask exceeds that, then you would have to break them apart. I'm hoping that helps navigate that question.
That's right. And again, if anybody is interested in the capital projects application, we are having a workshop today at 1 p.m. It's going to be the same Zoom link here. So if you just use the same Zoom link at 1, you'll be logged into our application workshop for capitals. And it'll be a lot of the same material, just slightly different to emphasize the differences in the application. Great. We'll give folks some more time to think about any questions they have. Again, if we answered one of your questions right now, if you have any follow-up where you don't feel like we answered it correct or we didn't provide enough clarification, feel free to raise your hand if you don't mind. We could also call on you, or you can add some more information in the chat.
And just to add to that, Jessica, maybe going to your earlier point, it's also a competitive program, so we understand if people want to be
yes
limited with what they're asking. I really want to stress that we're a resource. There's no limit on the number of TA sessions that you can request with us. If you want to have a conversation about the idea and do a walkthrough of the application with your project, brainstorm how it applies, or if you have questions about infill and how could potentially be considered for your community, we are a resource. And I want to just stress that there is no limit on the number of TA sessions that you can schedule, so don't feel it's not something we need to limit. So I really want to stress that we are a resource. We want to support you all to even kind of think through and answer questions that with greater specificity to help you assess eligibility or how you may want to prioritize, etc. Really want to just note that we want to support you all as much as we can. So please take us up on that, and we're here to help.
Great. We did get another question come in about I think how this relates to planning in a specific plan. So the question is, would developing planning documents such as specific plan feasibility or needs assessment for a specific area be considered would that be considered increasing housing via the general plan and the zoning amendment? And that a specific plan would cover more than just the dry infrastructure. So would a specific plan be partially funded? Could that be funded as part of the planning efforts here for utility infrastructure planning?
There would have to be planning documents. Planning documents are eligible. The key things I would stress is REAP 2.0 per the state guidelines is focused on implementation. And so whatever planning documents we're developing have to be, approved, adopted, whatever it is, they have to lead to implementation. So that's a key thing I want to flag about REAP 2.0, which is different than, the 1.0 version. I think technically a specific plan could be eligible, a portion of it. The key thing is that there would have to be demonstrable elements of it that are focused on the infrastructure. We had another program, the HIP program, that has now closed, that was focused on more of the housing land use planning, corridor planning to increase capacity for housing. This program is squarely focused on infrastructure. And so if the request would be a portion of a specific plan, then there would have to be clarity around how that specific plan is increasing the capacity for infrastructure to meet the housing need. And so this will maybe when we want to talk about a little bit more to understand, the specific circumstance. At the end of the day, planning documents have to focus on showing how there is going to be an increase in capacity for utility infrastructure to support the housing. And so it's really about how you're able to kind of make that case. So again, happy to talk a little bit more about this particular project. I just want to emphasize utility infrastructure capacity to increase housing. They must be together. And then, of course, you know, our criteria, et cetera. But those are the key things about this program.
Right. So yeah, be sure to set up some office hours. That's something we can definitely dig into more. Great. Any we'll keep letting folks think about any questions they may have. Our presentation wasn't that good that we left you with no questions. I'll also just note that if you apply for another one of our programs under PATH, the NOFA or the HIP, you'll see that the application is very similar. We had the same application template for each of those programs, but there are differences in some of those questions, so it wouldn't be a copy paste response by any means. There are some differences in the questions. I just want to point out there's some similarities there. And the one question coming in, if the HIP program is still open. No, that closed over the summer. So Rush is a little bit more delayed in its call for application, but the other programs already closed. But if you're working with a city that applied for funding, you may want to see what they or if you're in a city if you're a public works department, and it'd be good to check with your planning department to see if you see their name come up as an awardee of previous grants. We could see how maybe your project aligns to that. Great. Any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing anything coming through. So I cannot believe we ended this early.
There's a lot of information.
It's a lot, yeah.
Information, and so, you know, unless there are other questions, we can certainly let you all go for the rest of the day. But want to just emphasize again, there is a lot to consider. We want to make sure that you, as much as we can support, we have the office hours, the TA, to talk about any specifics. Please take us up on that, and we're here as a resource.
Yeah, I'll just put my email address here in case you have a pressing question that you'd rather just email us. And then I'll also put in the direct link to set up the office hours. You'll see there's quite a bit of availability for you to set up some time with us. So you can directly sign up for office hours with that link. You can send us an email with your questions. And yeah, thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.